Kingdom by Yasuhisa Hara is a historical manga set in China's era of the 7 warring states. It covers how this era ended, so obviously that would make it one of the longest ongoing series with a whopping 726 chapters at the time of making this video. And a manga of this length can't go on this long if it wasn't one of the most popular manga ever. And it's also one of my all-time favorite manga. So in this series, and starting with this video, I'll be reviewing this behemoth of a manga totally not Mark style, as to make it easier for new fans of the series to get into it and for veteran fans to re-experience the story from the very first arc. In long stories like these, the first arc is particularly important because it is what makes a reader decide whether they're gonna stick with the story or not. And oh boy, does Kingdom not disappoint with its first arc. The arc is basically a re-rise to power and overcoming a rebellion. But it doesn't start off like that, at least for the first 3 chapters. However, it starts off with 2 servant war orphans, Shin and Hyo. They have a dream of one day being great generals of the heavens. One day, Hyo got recruited to work at the royal palace, but he couldn't get the guy that recruited him to take Shin with him too. So Hyo goes with this man, thus making Shin alone. Just some time later, Shin overhears a guy talking about how there isn't a rebellion happening in the palace. Basically, the current king is not at the age of fully leading the state. So some slimy prime ministers decided to use the king's younger brother to start a rebellion. And it's a very bloody one at that. After we were given this information along with Shin, we cut to Shin being at the place where he and Hyo used to stay. Then Shin hears something at the door, and when he opens it, he's mortified at what he sees, Hyo being fatally injured. Shin grabs him and shouts for someone to call a doctor, but Hyo tells him that it's too late. He gives Shin a little map and tells him that he must go there at once. Shin and Hyo share a final touching moment, with Hyo telling Shin that we are the same, so if you're able to achieve our dream, then we both have achieved it. After saying that, Hyo passes away. Shin then follows the map that Hyo gave him, and it leads him to a very dangerous village. But that didn't affect Shin, and he pushes on to the destination. I love how Shin and Hyo's relationship was handled. In a short flashback, we get to see where Shin and Hyo's dream originated from. Since they're servants, they will always be that unless they pick up the sword. So when they're capable of enlisting into the army, they would be able to rise in the ranks depending on how they perform in the war. That made them decide to practice the sword until then. That's how they became insanely strong. After Shin finally arrives at the place that Hyo told him to go to, what he finds there is the king of Qin, who looks exactly like Hyo. Turns out the reason Hyo was recruited at the palace was to be a body double for the king, thus giving the king a chance at survival. Shin obviously gets mad and wants to get revenge on the king, but he's conflicted. Hyo went into this knowing the massive risk, and he died for the king. So after a bit of lashing out, the king Issei stops Shin and tells him what the situation is and what his options are. Either go back to the village and stay as a servant for the rest of your life, or go along with a weak king and become an instrument of war for him. There was really only one choice for Shin. Thus concludes the first act of this arc. I absolutely love how Issei has been handled so far. He's displayed like he's completely different from other characters. The way he's portrayed to us shows us that he understands the world way better than any other character. He's also not the stereotypical royal character in stories, unlike to basically sum it up, he's built different. And man, I only know he'll get better from here. I also love how Shin has been coping with Hyo's death so far. My man ran out of the country's copium supply. We also now have a little crew formed with Shin, Sei, and Ten. I didn't mention Ten earlier. He's a kid from this village that led Shin and Sei out of the village through a secret passage. And he's now joining them because he wants Sei to give him money for his help. Now moving on, we head into the main part of the arc, which is squashing the rebellion, thus having Issei return to power. Our main trio is headed to a safe place. In that place, they'll meet the remnants of Issei's supporters, and after a fairly long, rough journey, they finally get there. So what exactly is this fantastic safe place that they arrived at? Okay, a Qing king from 400 years ago was a really just king. He loved his people and he was loved by them too, which is a very rare thing. There is also this story about that king which entailed that a bunch of savages that lived in the mountains once killed his warhorse and ate it. So instead of wiping them like all kings at the time would do, he actually gave them some liquor and told them that it goes well with horse meat. That's the kind of man he was. He was the only king to open up the hearts of the mountain dwellers. What are the mountain dwellers, you're asking? In China, Qin lies farthest to the west, but even farther west lies the expansive world of the mountain dwellers. The world of the mountain dwellers was one the other citizens were never to encounter. But this king formed a pretty good relationship with the mountain people, so much so that he even opened up the west village for hundreds of thousands of mountain dwellers. But after he died, the link with the mountain people was completely cut, thus resulting in this place only being known by royals. But how's this place perfectly clean and well kept, you ask? The mountain dwellers, even after 400 years of that king's passing, they haven't forgotten about him. They even consider the place where they're at right now a royal land, so they keep it in good condition without anyone knowing. Okay, I went into full detail with this part for two main reasons. First, I wanted to show you how well Hara has studied history and how he's implementing that into his manga. He's putting all these details just for world building's sake. This is definitely a good sign for the future of this series. The second reason I went this much into details is because it will be needed for the future as a context. Alright, let's move on. An assassin has been following our crew to this location, and he finally starts his attack. After fighting with Shin a little bit, the king's supporters show up, and now we have a bigger crew. But it's still incredibly negligible compared to what the rebellion has. Also, they're very injured because they just came out of a battle with the pursuing army, and the general of the army is incredibly strong. He also gives off massive Hisoka vibes, but with big lips. After coming and chilling a bit in the summer house, Shoban-kun started explaining what happened. So basically, they fought the big lip general's army, and the general himself bested Shoban-kun. So with their captain gone, they had no leader, but Hyo took charge of the army like a true general would. Unfortunately, like we saw at the beginning of the story, he fell in battle. We come back to the present. That's when we find out that literally no one in the entire state supports the king, and they all just want the throne for themselves. Since we don't have anyone to back the king, our plan now is to get the mountain people on our side and work with them to take back the throne. But there is one problem with that. No one from Chin came in contact with the mountain people for over 400 years. With this, we start the third act with everyone heading to the mountains to get in contact with the mountain people. On a very tiring journey in the mountains, our group suddenly got surrounded by a bunch of mountain people, and they don't look very friendly. Surprisingly, they did accept that Sei meet with their leader since he's, you know, the king. But the twist is that he must go alone and the rest must leave the mountains or else they'll be slaughtered. Sei accepts because that's just the type of person he is, and the fact that they also don't really have any other options. After Sei left, the army obviously wanted to go with the king, so they decided that they would send a very small group, which was Shin, Ten, and Heki. And the way they chose Shin as the main guy for that group was a test from Shoban-kun, and he tested Shin by attacking him. After Shin defeats him, we get this great moment of Shoban-kun sincerely apologizing to Shin for Hyo's death. Just a little note, I absolutely love how Shin is dealing with Hyo's death. He's grieving, he's mad at the people that had a part in Hyo's death, but at the same time he's gradually forgiving them and trying his best to move forward and achieve his dream for both him and Hyo. This honestly speaks length to Shin's character and the type of person he is. Shortly after setting out on this mission, the group is captured by the mountain people easily, and they get taken to prison. On their way there, we get to see where the mountain people live and how it's structured. They're pretty much a full kingdom by themselves. This genuinely shows a great level of world building. The implications in the art really do show how these people live, how advanced they are, and what they value. All this is done 80% through art and the rest through dialogue. This speaks levels to the skill of the mangaka. He truly understands the rule of show don't tell. Anyway, now we get to meet the leader of the mountain people called Yotanwa. Then one of the mountain warriors takes Shin, Hiki, and Ten to the place where Yotanwa and Sei are. Yotanwa then says that he knows the king has no power. Then Yotanwa asks Sei why he went into the mountains. Sei, with absolutely no fear, says, "I wish you help me take back the throne." Yotanwa tells him, "You came to the wrong person, since the reason he was brought to the mountains was to be judged for what his people did. Because after the king from 400 years ago died, the mountain people were abused and separated into two groups. The first retreated back to the mountains, the other weren't so lucky, and they were killed by the people of Chin. Even after the mountain people went back to the mountains, the Chin people would still go and kill them." Sei apologizes and then tells Yotanwa that killing him here won't solve the problem, but in fact it will make it bigger. Yotanwa then wants to display the pain their people felt by cutting off the heads of Sei's 3 comrades when they were about to get executed. Sei stops the execution by talking about his goal of ending the 500-year era of war, and the way he's gonna do that is unifying all the states, then bringing peace to the region. Sei then says that he came here to get the help of the mountain people in making his dream a reality. Shin then breaks free and argues in his own way after causing a ruckus. After hearing both Shin and Sei talk, the mountain leader takes off the mask, revealing that she's a woman. She then accepts Sei's offer, and thus an unbreakable alliance between the mountain people and the state of Chin has been formed. Dude, this was one of the best interactions ever. with insane pieces of dialogue. If you have yet to read it, please do yourself a favor and read it. I couldn't really do it justice here. This scene shows how much of a Chad Say is. We truly see that he is built different. With this, the fourth act and the video is over. I hope you enjoyed it. Tell me in the comments below if you want their views to be longer, and if you have any suggestions to what I should do in the series, just let me know and I'll try to apply them as much as possible. Alright, with that, I'll see you all next time. Subscribe for more Kingdom and manga content later.